Hey, Life Youth, this is Jared here, and I hope you're having a good day today. And the weather's starting to get a little bit cooler, and eventually it's going to snow. That's probably a far way off yet, but I actually like the changing of the seasons. I like the leaves changing colors. I like it getting a little bit colder. I can wear a sweatshirt, all that good stuff quickly. Turn to the people on your right and your left and take 2 seconds and shout out what season of the year do you like the best. Go. Cool. Okay. Come back to me. I want to share just a little bit with you and then have you engage in a second as well. When I was a kid, when I was younger, I wanted to be a milk truck. Not a milk truck driver, a milk truck for Halloween. That's what I wanted to go as. I would tell my mom I want to be a milk truck. I don't know why I'd never seen a milk truck before, at least in our neighborhood or anything. Maybe on TV, but that's what I wanted to be. And then my mom would ask me, "Well, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And I just thought, well, whatever I be for Halloween, I might as well just be what I am for Halloween when I grow up. So I'll be a milk truck when I grow up. I don't know what was going through my head at the time. Obviously, that changed over time, and then evolved into, well, I want to be a baseball player when I grow up, or I want to be a fireman, or whatever ideas I had in my head at the time. And nobody ever really says necessarily, well, I want to be a pastor when I grow up. But eventually, that's where God took me. I'm curious if you want to take a moment, what you would want to be when you grow up, and that's probably a stage of life that you're in right now as you're thinking about what does the future hold for you. So again, take I don't know, just 5 or 10 seconds and go just maybe a couple people. If you know off the top of your head what you would say when I ask the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? Go ahead and do that right now. I'll wait. Okay. Some of you can share still during your small group time, and I'll obviously write that in the questions too so that you can talk about that. But I want to share a story, and conveniently, we're still in the book of Mark. If you're just joining us, maybe you haven't been with us the first 2 weeks, we haven't gotten that far. So we're still in chapter 1. If you want to go back and read the beginning of chapter 1 and go all the way to verse 15 to catch up, you can certainly do that. I'm going to be starting in verse 16 tonight. Also, I just kind of an announcement. I had to delete the video from last week because I had my driver's license on it and all of the information on there. And so I thought it would be best not to have that public out on YouTube. So I apologize if I need to reinvent the sermon. I can certainly do that for you. But I want to read just a quick story here in Mark chapter 1, verse 16, and then talk about this a little bit. One day, as Jesus was walking along the shore of the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and his brother Andrew throwing a net into the water, for they fished for a living. Jesus called out to them, "Come, follow me, and I will show you how to fish for people." And they left their nets at once and followed him. A little farther up the shore, Jesus saw Zebedee's sons, James and John, in a boat repairing their nets. He called them at once, and they also followed him, leaving their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired men. That's it. That's the whole story. Nothing really dramatic, nothing really crazy going on, at least at face value with this story. But we're talking about some young men who live in a fishing village. I actually got an opportunity to go to the Sea of Galilee. It's not a sea at all, it's just a giant lake. It's beautiful. But there's a lot of fishing, even to this day, that still goes on. And so there's a village called Bethsaida, which means house of hunting or house of fish, depending on how you uh, uh, interpret it. And now you have Jesus coming to these fishermen and asking them to follow him. Now, the thing that we might not necessarily see is the context. So I asked you earlier, what do you want to be when you grow up? And for a Jewish person, every Jewish boy had to grow up learning the Torah, which is the first 5 books of the Old Testament. They had to learn it and they had to memorize it. And what's even more is they had to have it memorized by the time that they were about 11 or 12 years old. And then after that, for those that were especially gifted at understanding the Torah, they could go on to eventually follow a rabbi, follow a teacher. And then that's ultimately what they would do with their lives, is eventually maybe they would become a rabbi, a great understanding person of the Torah, and be very well respected in the community and all of those kinds of things. But when Jesus runs into these guys, guess what they're doing? They're fishing. They're fishing. And they're probably past the age of 12 by this point, which means a couple things. They've taken the trade of their father, whether they're a masonite, whether they're a fisherman, because we find some other people are builders. And I've got myself a hammer here. My dad was a custodian in a school, and so this would be my tool. If I had failed in my understanding of the Torah, if I didn't measure up, then I would go and do the trade of my father. And this is what's happening, is we see these young men fishing. Jesus is a rabbi. He's a teacher. And he goes and he chooses them. He asks them to come follow him. Now, the thing about that is, if they're doing the trade of their father, it means that they fully didn't really do all that great in learning how to understand the Torah and learning to memorize it, in learning what it means to follow a rabbi, which was every Jewish boy's dream in that age. No, instead, they went back to the trade of their father. And so Jesus comes to find them and says, hey, I want you to follow me. This is actually a really big deal. We read the story and we're like, okay, great. He just finds some people that are fishing. This doesn't seem all that dramatic, but this is a story about identity, about who you are. That Jesus doesn't just go after the best and the brightest and the ones who are at the top of the class and the ones that everybody else would pick. No, he actually goes specifically to the young Jewish boys who maybe didn't measure up in their Torah school, who maybe weren't the top of their class, who actually just went back to what they knew. They just went back to their father's craft. And for them, in their case, it was fishing. And Jesus says, I want you to follow me. What does it say about God? What does it say about the character of Jesus, in that he goes after people who don't necessarily measure up by everybody else's standards in our culture? I wonder about you. What about you? Do you ever wonder if you're supposed to measure up, if you're supposed to be somebody that you're really not? And so maybe you try all different kinds of things, maybe in your school, maybe in your friend groups, you wear certain things or say certain things or act out in certain ways to try to gain acceptance, to try to gain people's pleasure. And maybe it just doesn't work. Guess what? Jesus isn't concerned about how culture thinks about your identity. He doesn't care if culture has given up on you. He's willing to come after you. He's willing to be the one that says to you, come, follow me. And I'll show you a different way of living, a different kind of trade, in a sense. A different job. I have a job for you. I have a purpose for you. He gives these guys purpose, where they thought, well, this is probably where I'm always going to be. This is what I'm always going to do. Jesus sees potential in them. My question is, do you see potential in yourself? And here's the thing, even if you don't, God always will. God always does. I want you to explore this idea a little bit more in your small groups. Talk about this idea of identity. Who are you, and who are you becoming? And if you're a little bit younger yet and you're still just figuring life out, that is entirely okay. It's going to take some time, and that's okay. But read through this story again and think about, what would you do? What would you do if you were this young boy, this young girl who had just gone back to what was familiar, you were nobody special, and then Jesus came and said, no, I actually have a plan for you, what would you do? Answer that question, but also any other questions that we have in the small group questions. And then we'll see you soon.